Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Sell. In this first lecture, we're going to be talking about science. What is science? Before we can go into any one of the particular areas of science that we're going to be studying in this course, we need to take a look at what science itself is. What is science? So what is it? Well, to start with, science is a set of information and a way of looking for patterns to make sense of the environment and natural processes. So what does that mean? Yes, science is a set of information. It's that stuff that you find, when you look through a science book and whatnot like that. But more importantly, science is the process of looking for and being able to develop that knowledge. It is a process. So it is not just a body of knowledge, but it's a way of getting to that knowledge and thinking about things. Science is all around us. And most importantly, science is fun. I have taught science for over 30 years, and the reason that I teach science is because, well, we have the most fun, to be quite honest. We have the best toys and the best things to use. It's just fun. Science is something that we do. And that's something that I need for us to all make sure that we're doing and think about science as a verb. Science is something that we do, not just something that we're reading or looking at or hearing in a lecture or whatnot. Science is something that we do. Does science have all of the answers? No, science doesn't have all of the answers. In order for something to be a scientifically valid question, it has to be testable. We have to be able to design either an experiment or collect observation in order to answer this question. For instance, the question, does Thor, the Viking god of thunder, exist? Well, this is not really a scientific question given the fact that we have no possible way to gather evidence that he either exists or doesn't exist. And so that's not really a scientifically valid question. But we can answer questions about what causes thunder and lightning. That is a scientifically valid question because we can make observations and we can develop even experimentation in order to answer that questions. So not all sorts of questions can be answered by science. But when we're thinking about natural phenomena, things that take place in the natural world, these can be scientifically answered questions. So what can science not do? Science cannot confirm or deny the existence of any kind of a deity. That sort of thing is outside the realm of science. For instance, the mythology of the Celts held that there were spirits that dwelt inside trees, hence the whole idea of knocking on wood. Knocking on wood is going to wake up the spirits and, give you good luck and whatnot like that. This is not something, the existence of spirits is not something that science can deal with. Does science prove things? No. This is something that you'll hear often. If this is scientifically proven, science doesn't prove anything. What science does is it offers evidence to support hypotheses. According to the best data that we have available, this is true, or according to the best data that we have available, this is not the way that this takes place. So science doesn't prove anything. All we can do is offer evidence to support hypotheses. So who is it that does science? What does a traditional scientist look like? Now, take a second and I want you to think, okay, if I were to ask you to do this, and this is something that you could do with your own students at some point in time, what does a scientist look like? Chances are you're going to get something like this. Okay, and kudos to those of you who know that this is Dr. Victor Frankenstein from the original movie Frankenstein, Universal Studios. It's a great movie. It's not so much a scientific movie, but a fun one nonetheless. But this is the image that most people will give when you think about what is a scientist. A white guy in a lab with all sorts of machinery and the mad scientist. And in fact, I do have a magnet on the board in my office that says, "Why be a normal scientist when you can be a mad one?" But this is not really the image of a scientist. We all do science. We all make observations. We all gather data. We all draw conclusions from that data and from those observations. So as a result, we are doing science. And that's what we need to be teaching our students, that we're all doing science. Science is not something that is confined within a laboratory by, a white guy in an outfit. Science is all of us. So in order to deal with science itself, we need to think about the nature of science, and that is the way that science itself works. So there are several things here that I want for you to constantly keep in mind. So to start with, scientific knowledge is tentative, not static. So what does that mean? Well, tentative means that things can change, and which is not static. Scientific knowledge can change. At one point in time, we thought that the Earth was only 5,000 years old. And then as we started to gather data, oh, well, maybe it's 1,000,000 years old. Well, maybe it's 100 million years old. And the better our observations became, the more detailed our data collection was. Now we know that, at least according to the best data available, that the Earth is close to 5 billion. It's over 4 billion years old, so about 4.5 to 5 billion years. So science is not static. Now, science is very stable. It takes a lot in order to change scientific knowledge. Scientific knowledge is empirical, based on observation. Okay, scientific knowledge is empirical. We have to be able to make observation. We have to be able to collect data in order to draw a scientific conclusion. Scientific knowledge is theory laden. Now, what that means is it could be subjective. If I'm the one who's interpreting the data, then I'm human, and all of my past experiences are going into the interpretation of that data as well. And so there could be some bias in the interpretation of that data, which is what it means to say that scientific knowledge is theory laden. We like to think that science is as is as non-biased as possible, and we try to keep it that way. However, being human, we know that everything that we interpret is going to be filtered through all of our own personal experiences. Scientific knowledge is partly the product of human inference and imagination. Human inference and imagination and creativity. Imagination and creativity are not things that people tend to associate with science on a regular basis, but it takes imagination and creativity in order to develop the ability, develop the procedure to collect scientific data. Or even come up with a question in the first place. If you can't come up with a good question, it's going to be very difficult for you to figure out what answers will answer that question. And that requires some imagination and creativity. Scientific knowledge is socially and culturally influenced. Well, this makes sense too, because the scientists in a particular culture are going to be focused on those things that are important within that culture. If we lived on an island nation and tourism was a big industry, then the scientists on this particular island would probably want to focus on asking questions about coral reefs and how does the global warming affect the bleaching of corals? How is the symbiont algae that lives with the coral, how is that being affected by the temperatures of the water or the air or other things that are in the water? And so those things that are socially and culturally important, those are going to be the things that the scientists in that culture are going to focus on. So scientific knowledge is influenced by the culture and society that it's produced. Science approaches problems in many ways. Now, this is going to be the one that comes as the biggest shock to most of you. Everybody has had ingrained in them since time immemorial the scientific method. First, we develop a hypothesis. Then we come up with, our procedures. And then we have our so on and so forth. Well, to be honest, the whole reason that that exists is because scientists, when they produce papers for scientific journals and whatnot, do follow a specific method when they are writing up their scientific knowledge, and they, in that particular way, to keep it easy for everybody to understand, it follows a particular order. You know, here's what we thought, here's what we did, here's how we did it, and here's what we found out, and here are the conclusions that we drew. So somewhere along the line, textbooks, particularly trade textbooks for schools, picked up on this and started calling it the scientific method. I'll be honest, I have worked in science for, like I said, worked in science for over 30 years, and then was a science, like pure science, biology was my undergraduate major. Before that, I have yet to meet a practicing scientist who said, oh, wait, no, we can't think about procedures until we have developed our hypothesis. No, that's kind of stupid. No one really does that. So there is no one scientific method. Scientists approach scientific problems from lots of different perspectives. And so you don't have to follow this recipe in order to get to that. Theories and laws are two different kinds of knowledge, and each is important. Theories and laws, and we'll talk more about the difference between these two, but theories and laws are both important. The two are not interchangeable. Theory is not what the non-scientific world uses that term for. In the non-scientific world, oh, well, I have a theory, and you use it interchangeably with the guess. That's not the case in science. In science, for something to be referred to as a theory, it has to have a wide body of evidence from lots of different perspectives supporting it in order for it to have been referred to as a theory. A theory is an overarching idea that explains a wide amount of observations. That's a theory. For instance, the theory of evolution. The theory of evolution allows us to explain a wide amount of observation. Laws, on the other hand, are things that we find primarily in chemistry and physics. You're not going to really find any laws in biology because this tends to be something along the lines of mathematics, something that you will see happen over and over again. For instance, F is equal to m times a. Force is equal to mass times acceleration. Okay, Newton's second law of motion. If I measure the force and I measure the mass and I measure the acceleration of an object, I will always get F is equal to ma, always. And that's because that is a mathematical law. It is a law within physics that will take place. Theories do not grow up into laws. Theories do not become laws. Laws cannot be used as a theory to explain a wide amount of observation. So these two things are very different. Observations and inferences are also very different things. When I observe something with my senses, that's an observation. I can see it, I can hear it, smell it, taste it, touch it, although I probably would lay low on tasting when it comes to most parts of science. That is an observation. So measurements, if I can measure something, length, width, height, mass, volume, density, which is a derived measurement, those things are all observations. Inferences explain those things. And so that'll make more sense in just one second. So laws versus theory. So take a look at this. So a scientific law is something that usually requires a mathematical model, whereas a scientific theory is a broad working hypothesis that is based on extensive experimental evidence from lots of different perspectives over time in order to say that this particular theory is the explanation for whatever it is that we're looking at. So here's a link for you to read more about theories and laws. Now, take a look at this particular image right here. I love to use this image in classes to think about the difference between observations and inferences. What can you observe here? We can observe that there's a goat. We can observe that there's a child or a person, a human, who's sitting in water. There's a boat here. There's a branch above the child that's broken. I observed this. Now, what could you infer? Well, I could infer from the fact that the child is in the water that he must have climbed this tree and was out here on this limb, and the limb broke, and so now the child's in the water. He may have been climbing out on the limb to get the boat. He might have climbed up the tree because the goat was chasing him. Those are things that we might infer, but we did not observe. All right, so what are some characteristics of scientists? Scientists are usually critical thinkers. Okay, so we need to think critically. They rely on empirical evidence. They tend to be curious. Now, this is one that I want to focus on right here. Curious. Small children are naturally curious. Why is the sky blue? Why is the water blue? Why are rocks hard? Why is this rock harder than this rock? Young children are naturally curious, which makes them perfect little scientists. The job that we have as science educators is to help funnel that curiosity into learning about science. Scientists are patient. Sometimes it takes a while for an experiment to run its course. Now, scientists should be as unbiased as possible. However, remember what I said, science is theory-laden. So when you make observations and you interpret those observations, you will interpret them through your own experiences. And so as a result, there may be some bias there, but we want to try to be as unbiased as possible. Scientists are creative. Scientists tend to be skeptical. Okay, so a scientist is a skeptic. Scientists should always doubt what they have found. Repeat it. Does your repeated results come out to be the same? If so, then chances are you probably have a good answer here. Scientists should also be open to new ideas. Remember the very first thing that I said about the nature of science. Science is not static. So scientists must always be open to new ideas. We have to have successful testing in order to be good scientists. Okay, and that's what I was saying. Repeatability, repeatability, repeatability. Here are some websites that are going to be useful for you. And you will be able to find these by taking a look at the non-recorded version of this PowerPoint. So you'll be able to see these. So here's GACE information. And I've got this separated for those of you who are middle grades versus those of you who are elementary grades. So do go back and take a look at this information on the version of this that is simply a PowerPoint slideshow and not the recorded lecture. So you can kind of work through all of these to see. The whole point of this course is for you to be able to do well on the GACE, which is why all of these links are here for you so that you can work through and find things out to help you along with the GACE. And we will have those for you for each section of the course. So what we'll be studying in the course, we start the course with life sciences, then we'll do ecology, then we'll have the physical sciences, which includes chemistry and physics, and then we'll close out the semester with earth sciences. And with that, you have completed your first video lecture.